right, now accidentally I really did hose this thing up. So I'm just going to walk you through the rest of the chapter, and then I'm going to go back in and fix it. And when I fix it, I'll add to this lecture, put a little bit more in there. I apologize, but like I said, I hosed it. I moved a bunch of stuff around, and then when I did, I don't know why, but I removed something that shouldn't have been removed. So I tried adding it back. I got up to a certain point, and then it just hung. So I'm like, forget it. All right. So the next thing that's in here is changing the way an article displays. This is on page 157 in the book, and it says one lump or two. What they want to get to, all right, is they come through here on page 158. This is what I was doing when I goofed up. It says they want you to go to Content Article Manager, open the article we've just created to edit it, okay? As it says, they want you to put some extra text at the top that just says the characteristic of truly bad art. So the idea, what they want you to basically do here is set it up so that's going to be the teaser. In other words, that's what's going to show, and then when you get underneath it, they want you to add a read more link. And when you click the read more link, notice what they say here on step 4. In the articles panel, they want you to set the show intro to hide. What that means is this will only show the just what is ugly, or the whatever that is, the characteristics of truly bad art. That will only show, all right, when you've got just the teaser there. But as soon as you click the read more button, that will disappear. So again, that's the kind of thing that you might want to make available to somebody who's not registered. All right, and then in the read more link, remember it doesn't have to say read more. You could have it say something like, make sure to register to see the rest of the article type of thing. All right. Okay. So when you do that again, that's basically what it's going to show, and they have you come in here, and it says you're taken to the home page. In the main menu, click on the view on bad arts. So right now it's just the heading, and it's got the teaser with the read more when you get done. Okay. Notice and I think I said this earlier, I want to say it again, notice where it says written by super user. We'll hit on that in chapter 9. Right now, since we haven't done anything to create other users, you're the only user. You are super user. So everything that you've created thus far has been created by super user. So when you see that, that's exactly what that means. All right. So the idea, again, is when you click on the read more link, as it shows right here, the just what is ugly art, then your article will show. So they have, when they say they're splitting it, they really aren't splitting it. They're just putting a read more in. They're splitting it like we've split articles in the past. All right, but now they're actually going to come in and do a real split, so to speak, on it. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, they put a fax on bad art in it. I don't know exactly why they decided to do it like that, but that's what they did. I guess the advantage of doing that is if you decided you didn't want it there anymore, all right, you could have that be kind of a clearinghouse type of area, or you could go choose to take everything that's in there and just archive it, all right, later. But again, the idea is when you get done, this is what you're going to have, all right. Okay, so as the author says here, any article in Joomla can consist of one continuous text. Sometimes, as they mentioned there, with things like blog posts, that would make sense. Other times it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So what you can do, and again they mention this starting on the bottom here of 159, is the author says, suppose you've got an article with several sections, each doing a subtopic. Like I mentioned, it might be something like a tutorial, it could be something else. All right, but what the author says is, it doesn't fit on one content screen, and you don't want your user to keep having to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, etc. Because that can get a little painstaking, it's just kind of a pain. And it also may not have the aura of being real professional looking either. All right. So, as the author says, you can come back in here and notice what it says now. Select the page break locations. Okay. This is where Joomla will split an article into separate pages. In this example, we'll replace every heading by a page break. Everybody hear that? So they're going to get rid of all the headings that we put in there and replace them with just page breaks. Then what's going to happen is in the page title, you'll put the just what is ugly art, and in the table of contents, they'll put back those headings. Does that make sense? So again, you are doing a split, and the idea is when you get done, you get this. So on page, the page 1 will still be that teaser page. When you click that, it'll bring this up as page 2. With your paragraph, you click next, it'll bring up page 3, and it'll have the picture of the guy there with the text. You click next again, it'll bring up the handshake, and you click next again, it'll bring up the last page. Do you understand what they're doing here? Does that make sense? All right. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like I said, the example itself is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the example, other than the fact, in the way they set it up, it's sort of a contrived example. It's probably not one that you'd actually use this for. All right, because there's just not a lot of text here. All right. Now, if you had a really big, if these were going to be really intricate pieces, of art, you probably would have more text associated with each one than they show right there. And it might make a lot of sense to do that. Maybe you wanted to literally show, you were going to have 5 paintings that were going to be there as part of an exhibit that some famous artist was putting on. Then it might make sense to do something like that. All right, and I think that's kind of what the author is trying to kind of mock doing right here. Again, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but it's not the best example. Well, what he mentions here on the bottom of 161 and going on to 162, as it says, with the current release of Joomla, really with Joomla 3, what you can do is you can add other things. So what they're talking about doing in here is if you go in and you go into Extensions Plugin Manager, and under the basic options, you come down here and you choose sliders, it will literally choose a slider. So notice what we've got up here, where we've divided it, we've got panels. So what do we have? Well, you've got each one of the things you can choose here, and you click them. You don't have the previous and next buttons. So if you think that looks too unprofessional, or if you don't like it, you can choose the way that this stuff is shown. That's all. And that's, yeah. When you come through here, that's literally what you're going to end up having. All right. So, turning up to 163, the author says, let's create yet another new article in the facts category and try out some of the other possibilities in images and links. And what the author is saying is right now, you're just clicking that images button, but there's other ways that you can put in images also. And that's what he wants to talk about starting on the bottom here of page 163. So again, he has you go into Content, Article Manager, and add a new article. All right, an overview of bad art. And in the category, he selects facts, he enters the paragraphs, etc. And now what he wants you to do is he wants you to put in the basic text. This is going to be done almost exactly the way we did it in the past, where we had those pictures, where we used the landscape art that came with Joomla. All right. This is the same stuff that we looked at before. He'll put in the intro image, you'll say whether or not you want it floated, you'll put in your alt, and if you want, you can put in a caption. In the intro image, again, that's going to be the equivalent of your thumbnail, right? That should make sense to everyone, okay? And then, where it says add a full article image, we'll come down to the other part, and that's down below this, and we'll choose the big image. Bottom line is, when you do this, all right, and you click and you open it, this is what's going to happen. Now, this is what's going to happen because if you look right here where it says Bad Art Museum in Ohio, the Museum of Bad Art, etc., that's what I mentioned to you before, where you've got those A, B, and C links. Now, the author says for right now, just put in Bad Art Museum Ohio, Museum of Bad Art, and the Virtual Bad Art, and just have them go anywhere. He just has them go to Google or something like that. But you literally could put links to other things in here. All right? And after you do that, what the author says is, well, you might consider this doesn't look that professionally, and maybe these links would be better at the bottom of the screen, for example, as opposed to at the top of the screen. So as he says there, you can tweak it. All right? And notice when you go to the article options tag, position of links, by default it's set up to above. If you change it to below, that's what happened. Does that make sense? All right. And the author has also come through here and started to clean out under the article details. So in other words, the author comes in here and has you remove that stuff that you see right in here. It literally is a matter of going in there and checking and unchecking things to show it and to not show it. All right? And there's other things that you can add in there that he gets to a little bit later in the chapter that are not even shown by default. You ever gone out to a site where they've got an article and they've got either a thumbs up, thumbs down, or they have a rate this article with stars in it? He'll show you that by the end of the chapter in here also. All right? But this looks, I think at least, by removing the stuff all right, and putting the links on the bottom, it looks a little bit more professional. There's yet other ways this can be done also. One thing that the author mentions in here, this is an important point, I want to make sure I don't not tell you it, is when you do go in and you start setting all this stuff that we just talked about, you know, coming in here and setting all this stuff to wherever the heck it was, in here, the slider, etc. All right. Notice what he says on the top of page 163 here, because I neglected to show it to you. But notice, you can only choose one presentation style for all page breaks on your entire site. So if you set these up basically to an accordion, they're going to be set up like that in an accordion for everything. All right. But the author says if you don't want to do that, he says there are many extensions available in Joomla which do give you a little bit more latitude. But what he's saying is here, by default, if you use what's built into Joomla and you set it up like that, it's going to be set up like that for every article that falls into that kind of realm. All right. So we went through the displaying the links with articles. All right, went from here to here. Again, you may or may not agree, but as it's going on here, it's looking more and more, at least I think, it's looking more and more professional looking. All right. Then what he does for several pages, and I don't want to read to you, but he goes through the different things on the publishing option tab here. It's important. This is the kind of thing that, do you need this? No. All right. Do you need this to do your site? Maybe. Because what he's doing in here is he's explaining, when you go through the publishing options, everything that's in here. All right. And I am going to expect that when you start to create your site that you will do things like when we get to in Chapter 9, where you'll make certain parts of the site available to everybody, some stuff to registered users, etc. All right, I want you to be implementing the different stuff that's in here. Now, what I thought of doing, and to me this made more sense, correct me if you think I'm wrong, is giving you something next week that will be, for lack of better words, kind of part 1 of your requirements. And this will be the kind of stuff I'll expect from the first 6 chapters. I can put it all in there, but we haven't gone over chapter 7 through 12 yet. But you can at least start thinking then, okay, I'm going to do a site based on this. Okay, it'll make sense from chapter 3 I can pull in this on a page, and chapter, etc. So what I'll do is I'll start listing out for you in your requirements what I'll expect you to put in. And that'll be part 1. Then when we get done with chapter 12, it'll be part 2. All right, and then I'll expect you to give me that, and then you'll spend the last 6 or so weeks in here working on that. Does that make sense? Because that to me would make more sense in you doing something. You know, I am expecting you to come through here and actually complete this. That's going to be probably about a third of your grade. All right, and you know, just because I've been having problems, I want to go back and fix it because I want to show you mine when I get done. All right, and again, with mine, I now have those things available. I can go back in if I want, and I can use the author's things where he says, you know, buy tickets here. You saw that I made that thing, that BAM thing. I put my own in there. I put my own logo in there. I don't care whether you use the author's things or your own things. But I just want to make sure that you've gone through those steps. And, you know, the only way that I can make sure that you've actually gone through those steps is to grade you on it. All right, is to make it worth something. So to me, if it's worth about a third of your grade and you get it done, and I'm not going to look through every single little nook and cranny, but if Teresa says, I'm done with mine, then fine. I'll just come over there and spend 5 or 10 minutes walking through the site, looking at different settings and different things that are in there. Can I grade all of them in one period? I don't know. Probably over 2 hours with about 8 of you, I would think so. All right, that'll give me somewhere around 15 minutes or so for each person. I would think that's it. I'll have my own little checklist of things that I'm looking for. All right, and probably a lot of the stuff that's I'm going to give you to do. It'll be almost the same kind of checklist. All right, so the stuff that's in here. So if you want it, you want to be able to change the date. All right, notice what it says. Change this value to manipulate the created date that Joomla can use to display any article. By changing the date, you can bring an existing article to the attention of the visitor because it'll appear in the list of new items. All right, it's kind of like, for example, if you go into Starnix or the Linux, Unix land, there was always something, and I'm sure there still is something similar to it. All right, if we wanted to prove to our boss that we were doing work, and our boss could do this, our boss could go in, like I can go into your H drive, our boss could go into our accounts and check like the dates that we had on files and stuff, but you could use a Linux thing or Unix thing called touch. And if you ran touch on a file, it would just change the date, the last modified date on it. You could put in a whole bunch of names, and he couldn't figure out that you were doing that. I shouldn't say that. He was too foolish to figure out that many of us were doing that. You know, we had people that were writing programs that were simulating activity on your screens. So when your boss walked by, it would look like you were doing a whole boatload of stuff. And, you know, you could say, don't bother me now, I'm busy. And I don't mean to say we were screwing off. We were doing our work. But the work that we were doing, our boss didn't understand. And rather than spend the time to explain to him 15 or 20 minutes, and by the time he left there, 2 minutes later, he would have forgotten it anyway. We just made it look like we were doing stuff. All right. The start publishing and end publishing, you may or may not be aware of this, but before I throw anything out there, like, just to show you this real quick. Again, it'll probably fall into that category. You don't really care, but I'm just going to show you it anyway. That let's suppose that I go into Blackboard here, and this is something I actually should have done earlier anyway. And for this class, okay, so I choose this class, so it's the Advanced Website Development. There it is. And I decide, because I never did this, I decide that I want to put a new announcement out there, and I want that to say that so I go to create announcement, okay, and I want to come in and I want to say authors, images, now available. All right, and I'll say something like, I'll change this a little bit later, but, you know, good morning. And I'll just say add stuff later. Okay, now I click submit. Doesn't work. Okay, why? Because it wants me to come in and say, when I wanted to start displaying this, which is the current date, but unfortunately it defaults it to midnight tonight, all right, which is kind of stupid, all right, but I can come in here and either change it by using a clock, or I can manually go in here and just change it, so it change it to AM, for example, to 6 AM. And display until, and now I can go and click 15. I just put that in there because it's a year from now. It won't be up there anyway. But now I can come back and I can click submit, and you'll notice there it is. Good morning, add stuff later. All right. And the only reason I'm showing you that is what we're talking about doing is the same thing right here with the start publishing and the finish publishing date. You can tell it when it wants to, you want to begin showing it and when you want it to end showing it. And so if you had an art show coming up, you might want it so it shows that a month, you know, into the before the show comes up. You may not want to remove it the day after, but probably within a couple days you want it to stop showing. All right, that kind of thing. This is the stuff I mentioned before with the show title, the show. That's all the stuff that's here. And as mentioned, you can either remove all of it, or you can say that instead of appearing at the top, which it does by default, you can use the position of article and have it display on the bottom. All right. Then it's up to you. And exactly, again, there are going to be some articles that are in here that you might want to put in, you know, the show voting, for example, which we're going to get to in just a second. All right. Like that. Even in the thing that you're doing. I'm not, believe me, I like to think that, although I not only do I not know everything, and I know I don't know everything, I like to think that if I'm an ass, I'm not a real ass. In other words, I'm not going to take the time to go through here and pick out all 300 things they went over in the book. Make a checklist with all 300 of them and say, okay, if you do 50% of them, you get a C. 80%, you know, I'm not going to do that. But the site that you're working on, you may have an article that this would make sense for, as far as being rated. And you know what? You may not. And if you do, fine, and if you don't, that's also fine. All right? The read more text, I mentioned this before. You're not stuck to where, for the read more text, you have to have it say, you know, full story, and then whatever you want to have after that. Okay? There's different things that you can add there, as it says. You can add specific text for better usability. All right? Alternative layouts, as it says, you can select a custom layout for a current article provided by the selected template. Remember that if you're using the built-in templates, it's somewhat restricted as far as what you can do. If you go out and download a free template or you pay for a template, you can do more. All right? And as you'd guess, if you want more autonomy, if you want to be able to do more and play more with colors, fonts, whatever, you're going to pay more for that template. All right? It's probably not going to be under the free one. All right? Okay, under the Configure Edit Screen tab, and before we get to that, hopefully what I'm about to say makes sense. Think about it. If I'm going to create a really simple template, all right, and let's say it is simple, but it allows you, let's say, to go and put in the colors, you know, your favorite 2 colors, and your favorite first color will be the background, and your favorite second color will be the screen color. So, for instance, if I was going to do a Packer page, you know, site, I might want it to be green and gold. All right, you with me? But and it's real simple. You can't do a lot with it, and I make it free. Okay? And I notice, because I can keep track of how many people are downloading it, and a lot of people do download it. Okay? Let's just say it literally is into the thousands. Well, a couple things. The first thing those people are probably going to expect is when Joomla is updated, especially from a major upgrade like from 3 to 4, that I'm going to still make that available. All right, they used it. They don't want it to break when you go through an upgrade, etc. So they're going to probably expect that. Second, they're going to expect, even if it's free, if there are problems with it, that I'm going to have some kind of a forum where you can post stuff. Does that make sense? So the bottom line is, going along with all that stuff, I'm going to have to provide, even for a free site or a free template, probably a minimal amount of user support. Now, I'm going to provide a lot more support if I'm charging for it. And think about it. Even if I'm charging, let's say it's fairly cheap. I'm charging $5 if you want to download this template. And I get 1,000 hits. You go, wow, you made $5 grand. Did I? You have to start amortizing your time in order to do this. And again, I probably told you this, but there's a gentleman, I've never met him, but I met a guy who told me about him at Madison. He's one of the science and art, he teaches science and math. And he created this really cool thing that he did as an Android app for DNA, showing molecules, and it spins around, and it's 3D, etc., if you want it to be. And I said, well, how much money did he make from it? He said he's made about $84,000 from it. I said, wow, he's made a lot of money. He said, no, when he figured it out, he's already made any money whatsoever. I said, what do you mean? He said, he just keeps tweaking it. And that's the problem with this. Remember that anything like that you work on, that you're responsible for, you want to constantly make it better. All right. And if you don't, probably it was fairly mediocre to begin with, and it'll always be mediocre then. All right. So, Configure Edit Screen tab on page 170, as it says. Here you can set whether you as an administrator want to hide things, show things, and who you want to give credit to, or who you want to give permissions to. Again, Chapter 9 is all about permissions, so we'll hit on it at that time. The meta things, we've talked about this before. Chapter 12 is all on search engine optimization tips. And again, I still think it's a good idea. Mike mentioned this a few weeks back, that you ought to do it the right way to begin with. And if putting in meta tags can help at all, and you might never know whether or not it does, but why not put them in? It's not going to take a lot of time. And again, the time typically to put this stuff in is either when A, you're creating it, or B, if you make major edits to it and you want to edit the particular tags. Don't come back and do it when you're all done, because out of sight, out of mind type of an idea. All right. All right. So the last thing that's discussed in here of any merit is setting general permissions, all right, for all articles. So notice what the author says. The tabbed options panel allows you to set preferences for specific articles. But what you can do is you can go to Content Article Manager, click on the option buttons, and get the generic layout for everything. You can still overwrite it for individual articles, but sometimes you want a common look and feel for the site, and that's what the author is getting to here. All right. So he says if you go into the general settings now and you go into Content Article Manager and you click on the options button, this is some of the stuff that you're going to see. So you're setting it up like this for all articles. Again, you can do overrides, but if you don't, the advantage again is a common look and feel, all right, which may or may not be important. You know, there are sites that are out there that don't have a common look and feel on every single page. All right, there are other sites that are much more regimented that do. If I was a math teacher and I wanted to have a home page, and then I wanted to have, for example, this is how you do work with imaginary numbers. Here's how you do work with rational numbers. Here's how you do work with irrational numbers. Probably the look and feel of those pages would be very similar. You know, I would want every page to pretty much look alike. I just would have different examples, etc., on every page. Then I might use something like this. All right. If I was something where I was doing a site, maybe even with an art site, you could make the case and say, well, this is going to be on expressionistic art. I would say that in a thing like Corba, you'd want a lot of common look and feel. All right. If I was an individual artist, I might want mine to be a lot more expressive, where it might not have a common look and feel. So it's just going to depend. All right. So as the author talks about in here on page 171, the options under the article tabs, as it says, it defines the article properties, and most of these we've already gone through. All right. It says an option you'll only find here is that read more link. That determines the maximum number of characters for the article in a read more button. Okay, so if you want to put things in there, if you want to put limits on, for example. The editing layout, as it says, these options control what options are available on the article edit screen for users other than you. You've got the ultimate power, but as you'll see in chapter 9, there are other things. So as super user, you can also make other people super users if you want to do that and give them all the power you have. All right? And that might be done on a big enough site where there were a group of people with administrator rights. On a small site, there might only be one super user. But you might want to have other people that you give certain permissions. All right? You might want to give other people the ability to create articles and to edit articles. But they can create or edit articles, but you have the final say-so. In other words, they can make changes to them, and you, for lack of better words, you kind of queue them up until you've looked at them and then say, yeah, that's okay, and you give them you have the final say-so over it. So they show that there. On 172, the author talks about the category tab. As he says, they don't apply to options. They determine the way categories are displayed on category pages. So you've got some autonomy there. One option, as they mentioned, is choose a layout, where you can determine how category overviews are displayed by default. It's going to bring up that listing of things that we looked at before. All right. Then he explains what most of the different things that are in here that you're going to use. All right. The blog feature is the one that we've looked at pretty much thus far. And notice there's shared options, and there's a couple other things in here. There's, as it says, the category options display. You'll also find that these options will create a menu called List of All Categories. The blog is the one you're going to use most of the time. You can also go in and do some work with featured articles, etc. Does everybody know what RSS is? All right. For instance, we just were talking before, because it's timely with it being 9/11. A lot of people, what they were doing, it was kind of like what CNN looked like anyway. But if you subscribe to a site and you subscribe to RSS feeds, you can literally get the most up-to-date things sent to you every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes or every hour, depending on what it is. All right. You know, probably a thing that the people were using was like when we had the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, type of thing. So what the author is saying is the integration is only relevant if you're going to use RSS feeds. So again, if you decide you're going to do a site, Mark decides he's going to do a site about the Packers. All right. There may not be something that's relevant for an RSS feed, unless, you know, he wants to set it up so immediately when a game's over, you can start getting RSS feeds on injuries that the Packers had during the game. All right. So again, it always depends on what it is you're trying to do. All right. Permissions, again, we'll hit on in chapter 9, and the very last thing that's discussed in the chapter is archiving articles starting on 173. Again, what the author mentions here is when you bring up the details for the article, we already talked about published, meaning it'll be out there right away. Unpublished, where it's, for lack of better words, hidden. We've already talked about trashed, all right, where literally it gets put into the trash bin so you can empty the trash later, and you can have archived. All right, and as it says, when you do that and you go into the article manager, then there will be a list in there under archived, and it'll have one or more articles that are in there. Those articles by default aren't going to show. All right, they have been archived. That may be what you want to have happen. All right, or as the author says in here, let's go in and create a news archive. So that he has you grab one of the articles from the news category, the bad photography exhibit, and he has you change its status to archived. Then starting on the bottom of 174, all right, after you've done that, you've changed it to archive, he says that click on the archive button, the message appears to, to confirm that it indeed has been archived. All right, then it says navigate to menus, and under the main menu, add a new menu item that's called archived articles. All right, I'm sorry, select articles, archived articles, and we call it news archive. We put it in there. Now anything that you put into that, all right, that you associated with the news archive will now be automatically archived. All right, and again, you can be much more specific. Remember, this may be called archived. All right, just archives. And you may click on it, and instead of showing something like this, you may show some sublinks like we looked at in earlier chapters. Why? Because you might want to put it in something like that and look at our past newsletters. All right, and you click there, and it'll bring up archives where you've got a folder that just has your newsletter articles. All right, click here for past exhibits, something like that. Click here for something else. So this can be as simple as you want it to be, or as complex as you want it or need it to be. So you click on that, and again, it just shows that. And that's it. So again, in here, sorry I had the problems. I'm going to try to fix it right now. As it says, again, to create new articles, we went to the article manager. So it was content article manager and new for new articles, added for existing ones. We looked a little bit at the media manager to allow us to create new image folders. So we looked at that. We also looked at, and this is where it broke down a little, on how to break a long article into several interlinked pages. All right, in chapter 7, as it says, we're concentrating now. We basically have the site done. We are adding some information to it, but more than anything else, we're tweaking what we have. So in chapter 7, we're going to come in, and as the author says here, we're going to work on the home page. It's a little bit longer chapter than this one. So again, we'll do as much as we can on Tuesday of next week. If we get it all done, fine. Then Thursday, for lack of better words, will be a lab. All right. If we don't get it done on Tuesday, we'll finish it up on Thursday. So again, we're halfway done about with the book. All right. Some of the later chapters are a little longer. A couple of them are actually a little bit shorter. But 7, 8, 9 are kind of the hallmark of the second part of the book here. 10, 11, and 12 are shorter chapters. All right. Questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to attempt to fix the debacle that I made. And once I do, I'll go back and retape a little bit and show you what I did.